or comments that you may have. And we'll move on to Matt McKinley, a UPS worker and a Teamsters Local 150 trustee.
Hello, Mr. Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the California Teamsters. My name is Matt McKinley. I am in my 28th year as an employee at UPS. I started back in 1995 as a loader. I am also a trustee on the executive board of Teamster Local 150 based here in Sacramento. Our local represents 10,000 workers across the greater Sacramento region, including 2,200 UPSers. I was asked by our union to come here today and share the experience of UPS Teamsters who have seen an alarming increase in heat-related injuries in the workplace. With our summers getting hotter and longer due to climate change, this has become a growing problem in all workplaces, including at unionized employees like UPS. You may have seen reporting over the summers about Teamsters at UPS suffering from extreme and frequent heat exposure. We have pictures from our members using thermometers inside their trucks. It is not unusual for temperatures to exceed 120 degrees in the summer. Federal OSHA inspectors have documented heat indexes of 126. Combine that with an increase in e-commerce and a physically demanding job, it's easy to see why we have a problem. In some cases, our members have died from extreme heat, including Esteban Chavez Jr., who passed away while delivering packages for UPS in Pasadena this past year. He was just 24 years old. Last year, Jose Cruz Rodriguez, a 23-year-old UPS driver in training, died from a OSHA-determined heat-related illness. You may have also seen footage on social media from doorbell cameras capturing our members collapsing outside of homes, or TikTok videos of drivers baking cookies on the metal surfaces inside the trucks. Our union believes that reporting of heat-related illnesses and injuries are severely underreported. In the past several summers, it has become common to have 6 to 8 emergency room visits per summer for a staff of 400 inside my building alone. Generally, most of those emergency room visits are made after a 911 call. Personally, in the summer of 2020, I was helping one of my coworkers at the end of a shift who was suffering from heat-related illness. I had put him in an air-conditioned room and put ice packs on his wrist and neck, and in about 10 minutes of treatment, he collapsed into my arms and went in convulsions. After going to the hospital, his wife called me several hours later and informed me that the medical staff had let her know that had he not gone to the hospital, he probably would have expired. This is a very strong, robust man that was only about 35 years old and was close to 2 decades into his UPS career, so he was not unacclimated or unused to our working conditions. All the while, UPS vehicles are not equipped with air conditioning. The company has been slow to get drivers fans or make any accommodations to try and cut down the heat, either in the front of the vehicle or in the back, where it can be an additional 40 degrees hotter than the outside temperature. Keep in mind, this is a company that is making record operating profits year after year. On several occasions, UPS has been cited by OSHA for heat-related injuries, including here in California. And UPS is well known historically to both Cal OSHA and to the federal OSHA department as one of the most cited companies in the history of either department. Going into contract negotiations for our 350,000 members nationally and 30,000 here in California, the Teamsters will be pushing for a host of safety and health improvements in the workplace, including around heat illness prevention. There are feasible methods to control occupational heat exposure, such as staffing mandates or curfews for drivers so that they are not working 14 hours, only getting 10 hours off to go out and do the same thing again. Sometimes up to 6 days a week is what we're being mandated currently because of the pandemic, and that has been since March of 2020. Cooling stations inside the warehouse, as these kind folks told you about, it's not much better inside there. In the back of a 54-foot box truck, it again can be 120 to 130 degrees. Additionally, on top of that, maybe a regulatory standard in line with California Code of Regulations Title 8, Section 3395, which calls for cool down periods of 10 minutes for every 2 hours on days that it is 95 or above. This standard currently is for outdoor workers, which we are not classified as, including Amazon and UPS delivery drivers. In closing, we are not seeking to be made comfortable. We are only being asked to not be subject to illness, injury, or possible death in the performance of our jobs. Thank you for allowing me to come here today and raise these concerns. Our union looks forward to working with the legislators and regulators on meaningful efforts to address heat in the workplace.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. McKinley. And I think of all the legislators that have seen those TikToks, you brought it to the right one, because
Yes.
I have seen those TikToks.
Good.
And it's pretty appalling to see what's happening. And as was mentioned by Ms. Cornelio, I mean, it's one thing if you have the deaths, injuries, unfortunately happen at workplaces, but these are all preventable.
Absolutely.
And that is what really is inexcusable.
Yes.
And not only that, as Mr. Alamo was talking about on the last panel, the cumulative effect. I mean, you're talking about some of the acute injuries,
Yes.
But the long term, even if you don't faint, even if you don't go to the hospital, 5, 10, 20 years of that kind of exposure.
Yes.
You've been 28 years at UPS, especially with the last few years with climate change, we're seeing the hotter summers, even the fall and the spring. And so, it's, we definitely, I appreciate the feedback we're getting from our frontline workers, because that's the level of urgency that we need to have in terms of doing something about this, particularly because, as you mentioned, some of the delivery drivers, don't qualify under some of the current regulations. And so those are definitely things that we need to look at and from the legislative perspective, regardless of when and what the standards say, when they get adopted. Are there things that we can look at in the short term from a legislative perspective to put in regulations that are more common sense in terms of, whether someone's strictly indoors, outdoors. At the end of the day, you're suffering from the same issue of terms of heat. And I want to ask the same question I asked of our prior two speakers: is has Cal OSHA, have you, just from your own experience or maybe anecdotally from folks that you work with, are you aware of Cal OSHA doing inspections of your workplaces and work conditions based upon complaints of high indoor heat, or in this case, high vehicle heat? Are you aware of it? And if so, were any complaints resolved?
No, I am not. As well as being the trustee for Teamsters Local 150, I am also the chief steward for that building of roughly 400 covered members, 500 employees total. I have never known OSHA to come out for any heat-related issues. OSHA certainly has been there before for egress issues and pinch point issues and other safety concerns in the past. But as far as I recall, they have never been there for any heat-related concerns.
Well, thank you so much for that
Yep.
feedback. I really appreciate you sharing with us and hearing from warehouse workers, hearing from UPS workers, and those that it's kind of like the whole chain, right? You have the warehouse workers, and getting it to the consumer. I've said this
Yep.
many times during the pandemic, in particular, that it was quite a luxury for those of us who were able to work from home. But at the end of the day, there are plenty of essential workers that allowed of us to be at home and be safe. And that includes those that were bringing things to our doorstep, and at what cost to them, whether they're fast food workers, grocery store workers, Amazon warehouse workers, delivery, whether it's UPS or Amazon delivery, that allowed us to remain safe in our workplace. And as we go to our next speaker, something else that allowed us to be safe was the work of our nurses and those in our hospitals. And a couple years ago, I probably wouldn't have known what it meant when you said aerosol transmissible diseases. Unfortunately, I think that we've learned a lot about